I'm Jim Davis, the director of the Louisiana Center for the Book and the Louisiana Book Festival. And on behalf of the State Library of Louisiana and State Librarian Rebecca Hamilton, welcome to tonight's historic event. I know you aren't here to hear me, but quickly I'd like to thank Anya Crichton and Guy LaMolinara from the Library of Congress who are with us tonight. The Fouche Parish Public Library, especially Laura Sanders and Lynette Fazio. The National Park Service and Jean Lafitte Wetlands Acadian Cultural Center, and especially Angela Rathalay. The United Homa Nation, with whom our guest met this morning. Martha Surpass, poet and Galliano native, for her support. Kevin Rabelais, photographer, and Jerry Mayer, Hometown Productions, who is filming the program tonight. And a special thank to Elise Wascom of the State Library for her coordination of our guest visit. And then, of course, thank you for coming and being with us. Tracy K. Smith is the author of 4 collections of poetry, including Life on Mars, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and was a finalist for the National Book Award in Nonfiction for An Ordinary Light, a memoir. Walt Whitman heard America singing. Tracy, during this year, has heard America talking. Most recently this fall in Alaska, South Dakota, and Maine, before ending her tour with us in Louisiana. To continue these American conversations, please welcome the 22nd Poet Laureate of the United States, Tracy K. Smith.
Hey, good evening. Thank you so much for coming. I always feel like I feel so lucky on each of these trips because I have the opportunity to visit small communities and be welcomed so warmly by people there who are willing to talk about what poems make them think and see and feel and wonder. So thank you for the welcome and for being here tonight. I hope we can have a conversation. I'll start out by reading a few of my own poems, but I'd also like to talk a little bit about why I think poetry is so vital to our lives right now as 21st century humans. I feel like there are so many things pulling us in so many different directions, and as a result, we move quickly through the very surface of things. Added to that are all of the shortcuts to thought and speech that have become more and more a part of our lives. And my feeling is that those things are pulling us farther from who we are. They're pulling us out of conversation with our inner voice, which I think is so vital to being human. And poetry is something that says, wait, come back, slow down, let's go deeper. And let's do the work of thinking about what we see, feel, fear, love, and need. So I feel like this project has been in part about saying, let's be human together, and let's be vulnerable to our feelings, and let's use poems as a way of enlarging our vocabulary for who we are. So that's what I feel like we're doing together tonight. But I'll share some poems from Wade in the Water, which is my most recent book. It's a book that is thinking about contemporary America and our many problems, questions. I think the problems and questions that seem most active have to do with fear of difference, and racial difference is one of those things that befuddles America. And so in thinking about that, I've turned toward history to see if perhaps there is another angle on this question that we haven't heard fully enough. So I'll share some poems that are set now and some poems that are looking backward. I think trying to be very resourceful about, the trail that's been left us by generations before. But I'll start with a simple, grateful poem about nature. I feel like the natural world is one of the great sights of the holy. This is a poem that's set in Texas, hill country, which I visited for the first time a number of years ago. I'll share it because I feel like seeing so much of America on this tour has given me an appetite to talk about the different landscapes, and this is certainly one that I hope I will return to in language. Hill country. He comes down from the hills, from the craggy rock, the shrubs, the scrawny live oaks and dried up junipers, down from the cloud bellies and the bellies of hawks, from the caracaras stalking carcasses, from the clear sun-smacked soundlessness that shrouds him, from the weathered bed of planks outside the cabin where he goes to be alone with his questions. God comes down along the road with his windows unrolled so the twigs and hanging vines can slap and scrape against him in his Jeep, down past the buck caught in the hog trap that kicks and heaves, bloodied, blinded by the whiff of its own death, which God, thank God, staves off. He downshifts, crosses the shallow trickle of river that only just last May scoured the side of the canyon to rock, gets out, walks along the limestone bank, castor beans, cactus, scat of last night's coyotes. Down below the hilltops, he squints out at shadow, tree backing tree. Dark depth the eye glides across, not bothering to decipher what it hides. A pair of dragonflies mate in flight. Tiny flowers throw frantic color at his feet. If he tries, if he holds his mind in place and wills it, he can almost believe in something larger than himself, rearranging the air. He squints at the Jeep glaring in bright sun, stares a while at patterns the tall branches cast onto the undersides of leaves. Then God climbs back into the cab, returning to everywhere. Maybe I'll read you one. Oh, thank you. Thank you. You don't have to do that, but thank you. So I'll read you one more poem that's thinking about nature. I lived in New York City for just about 20 years. And 4 years ago, I left the city. I moved to Princeton, New Jersey, which is, it's a college town, but it's also got a lot of beautiful nature. I see foxes now as part of my everyday life and so many birds and trees, and I feel like it's gotten inside of me. Sometimes when I'm struggling to think about what we are doing, I look out my window and I say, what are the trees doing? What can they show me that we somehow don't see? So this is a poem that is, in a roundabout way, thinking about nature as well. But it begins with what is probably just a dream, although that's not what it feels like to me. The angels. Two slung themselves across chairs once in my motel room, grizzled in leather biker gear, emissaries for something I needed to see. I was worn down, by an awful panic, a wrenching in the gut, contortions. They sat there at the table while I slept. I could sense them with a deck of playing cards between them. To think of how they smelled, what comes to mind is rum and gasoline. And when they spoke, though I dared not look, I glimpsed how one's teeth were ground down almost to nubs, which makes me hope some might be straight up thugs, young, slim, raw, who bounce and roll with fearsome grace, whose very voices cause faint souls to quake. Quake then, fools, and fall away. What God do you imagine we obey? Think of the toil we must cost them, one scaled perfectly to eternity. And still they come, telling us through the ages not to fear. Just those two, that once, and never again for me since, though there are there, sightings, flashes, hints, a proud tree in vivid sun, branches swaying in strong wind, rain hurling itself at the roof, boulders, mounds of earth mistaken for dead does, lions in crouch, a rust-stained pipe where a house once stood, which I take each time I pass it for an owl. Bright whirl, so dangerous and near. My mother sat whispering with it at the end of her life, while all the rooms of our house filled up with night. Well, I'll read you the title poem and then maybe share one of the history-based poems. This, to me, is a poem that sort of straddles the present and the past. I've been working on an opera libretto for the last few years that has taken me to coastal Georgia and South Carolina, to the Sea Islands, for research. And on the first of those trips, we visited a number of sites with evidence of, this heavy and shameful history of slavery in this country. And I had the weight of that on my mind, on my heart. And on our last night, we attended a ring shout. And I was thinking about all of this history. I had feelings of, on one level, gratitude to descend from a culture that's been so resilient, so full of hope and forgiveness, and such a powerful voice of justice in this country. And on the other hand, a deep sense of pain. And with all of this in my head, I met somebody who was one of the performers. She saw me and she said, "I love you." And she gave me a hug. And that just opened the floodgates for me. I lost it. I felt so seen and so healed in a way by that gesture. And it wasn't at all diminished by the fact that she said, "I love you," to every single person that she met that night. She hugged them, and that's what she does. Her name is Bertha McKnight, and she's just this beautiful human being who I think is giving love. And I wanted to return to that feeling. So this is the poem that helped me to do that. And you'll hear toward the end, I think, a catalog of images from that history break into the poem. I like writing poems that surprise me. And this was one of them, "Wade in the Water." One of the women greeted me. "I love you," she said. She didn't know me, but I believed her. And a terrible new ache rolled over in my chest, like in a room where the drapes have been swept back. "I love you. I love you, as she continued down the hall, past other strangers, each feeling pierced suddenly by pillars of heavy light. I love you throughout the performance, in every hand clap, every stomp. I love you in the rusted iron chains someone was made to drag, until love let them be unclasped and left empty in the center of the ring. I love you in the water where they pretended to wade, singing that old blood-deep song that dragged us to those banks and cast us in. I love you, the angles of it scraping at each throat, shouldering past the swirling dust motes in those beams of light that whatever we now knew we could let ourselves feel, knew to climb. Oh, woods. Oh, dogs. Oh, tree. Oh, gun. Oh, girl, run. Oh, miraculous many gone. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord, is this love the trouble you promised? Thank you. All right, I'm going to read a poem that is built from the Declaration of Independence. It's an erasure poem, which means that I looked at that original document and I began to delete text and see if I could hear another source of information. And this is what I heard. Declaration. He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has plundered our, ravaged our, destroyed the lives of our, taking away our, abolishing our most valuable, and altering fundamentally the forms of our. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here, taken captive on the high seas to bear. Thanks. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from a sequence, a longer poem sequence that I wrote as a result of an invitation from the National Portrait Gallery about 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, the 150th anniversary of the beginning of the Civil War. And I thought, I want to write a poem, but I don't really, the Civil War is not my thing. Like, I don't know what I want to say about that. But I found some great books that gave me access to letters that Black soldiers and their family members wrote to one another and to President Abraham Lincoln during the war. And then also transcripts of depositions that veterans, their widows, and descendants gave after the war. And I like to say that sometimes those statements were given well into the 20th century. All in an attempt to claim the pension that as soldiers, as veterans, they should have been entitled to. But if you think about it, people who were born into slavery did not have birth certificates. They did not have marriage licenses. They were not given documents to attest to the fact that Even if they changed their name at emancipation, they were still the same person who had fought or served under this other name. And so many people were denied the justice of the pension. I thought I was just going to read all this information and learn it somehow and then write a poem in my own voice. But the more I read these letters and statements, the more convinced I felt that there was no reason to do anything but just gather these voices as they were together into a kind of a chorus and invite other people to listen to them with me. So that's what I've done. I'm going to read you 2 sections of a poem called I Will Tell You the Truth About This. I will tell you all about it. Excellent sir, my son went in the 54th Regiment. Sir, my husband, who is in Company K, 22nd Regiment, U.S. Colored Troops, and now in the Macon Hospital at Portsmouth with a wound in his arm, has not received any pay since last May, and then only $13. Sir, we, the members of Company D of the 55th Massachusetts Volunteers, call the attention of Your Excellency to our case. For instance, look and see that we never was freed yet, run right out of slavery, in to soldiery, and we hadn't nothing at all, and our wives and mother, most all of them is a perishing all about, and we all are perishing ourself. I am willing to be a soldier and serve my time faithful like a man, but I think it is hard to be put off in such doggish manner as that. Will you see that the colored men fighting now are fairly treated? You ought to do this, and do it at once, not let the thing run along. Meet it quickly and manfully. We poor oppressed ones appeal to you and ask fair play. So, please, if you can do any good for us, do it in the name of God. Excuse my boldness, but please, your reply will settle the matter and will be appreciated by a colored man who is willing to sacrifice his son in the cause of freedom and humanity. I have nothing more to say, hoping that you will lend a listening ear to an humble soldier. I will close. Yours, for Christ's sake. I shall have to send this without a stamp, for I ain't money enough to buy a stamp. I am 60-odd years of age. I am 62 years of age next month. I am about 65 years of age. I reckon I am about 67 years old. I am about 68 years of age. I am on the rise of 80 years of age. I am 89 years old. I am 94 years of age. I don't know my exact age. I am the claimant in this case. I have testified before you 2 different times before. I filed my claim, I think, first about 12 years ago. I am now an applicant for a pension because I understand that all soldiers are entitled to a pension. I claim pension under the general law on account of disease of eyes as a result of smallpox contracted in service. The varicose veins came on both my legs soon after the war, and the sores were there when I first put in my claim. I claim pension for rheumatism and got my toe broke, and I was struck in the side with the breech of a gun, breaking my ribs. I was a man stout and healthy, over 27 years of age when I enlisted. When I enlisted, I had a little mustache and some chin whiskers. I was a green boy right off the farm and did just what I was told to do. When I went to enlist, The recruiting officer said to me, "Your name is John Wilson." I said, "No, my name is Robert Harrison." But he put me down as John Wilson. I was known while in service by that name. I cannot read nor write, and I do not know how my name was spelled when I enlisted, nor do I know how it is spelled now. I always signed my name while in the Army by making my mark. I know my name by sound. My mother said after my discharge that the reason the officer put my name down as John Wilson was he could draw my bounty. I am the son of Solomon and Lucinda Sibley. I am the only living child of Dennis Campbell. My father was George Jordan, and my mother was Millie Jordan. My mother told me that John Barnett was my father. My mother was Mary Eliza Jackson, and my father Reuben Jackson. My name on the roll was Frank Nunn. No, sir, it was not Frank Nern. My full name is Dick Lewis Barnett. I am the applicant for pension on account of having served under the name Lewis Smith, which was the name I wore before the days of slavery were over. My correct name is Hiram Kirkland. Some persons call me Harry, and others call me Henry, but neither is my correct name. Thanks. Thank you. I'll read one last poem of my own, and then I hope we can kind of have a little back and forth with some poems from the anthology. This is a poem that came from a dream. I don't have a lot of poems that came from a dream, but I guess I have the two, this is being the second. And I woke up because I realized if I could write this down, then I'd have a real poem to keep. And initially, because of the content of the poem, I chose to call it The Mowers. But the longer I lived with it, I realized that maybe it was a metaphor for something else. So this poem is now called Political Poem. If those mowers were each to stop at the whim, say, of a greedy thought, and then the one off to the left were to let his arm float up, stirring the air with that wide, slow, underwater gesture, meaning hello and you there, aimed at the one more than a mile away to the right. And if he, in his work, were to pause, catching that call by sheer wish, and send back his own slow, one-armed dance, meaning yes and here, as if threaded to a single long nerve, before remembering his tool and shearing another message into the earth, letting who can say how long graze past until another thought or just the need to know might make him stop and look up again at the other, raising his arm as if to say something like still and oh, and then to catch the flicker of joy rise up along those other legs and flare into another bright yes that sways a moment in the darkening air. Their work would carry them into the better part of evening, each mowing ahead and doubling back, then looking up to catch sight of his echo, sought and held in that instant of common understanding, the God and speed of it, coming out only after both have turned back to face the sea of yet and slow. If they could, and if what glimmered like a fish were to dart back and forth across that wide, wordless distance, the day, though gone, would never know the ache of being done. If they thought to, or would, or even half wanted, Their work, the humming human engines pushed across the grass, and the grass, blade after blade assenting, would take forever. But I love how long it would last. Thank you. Thank you. I am really excited to have a little conversation with you over some of the poems in American Journal. Did everybody get a copy? Okay. So I put this together thinking I wanted to gather up a collection of poems that could be inviting to somebody who doesn't read poetry, somebody who might have a little poetry anxiety, which I know is not an unfamiliar condition. But I also wanted the poems to be interesting to people who already love poetry. So I was looking for poems that speak at once in familiar ways and that open up new possibilities, even within what we think we know. So what I like to do is read a poem, and if there's somebody in the audience who would maybe read it a second time so we could hear it in a different voice, that will give us another experience of the poem. And then my question really is so simple. It's, what do you notice? I know that there's a vocabulary for talking about poetic devices, but I don't think we need it. I think that we can enjoy and experience and even keep track of what poems cause us to feel and notice in the language that we live in. So I'm curious about what you see in the poems, what they make you think of, what questions they raise, what connected thoughts come to mind. I think all of that is useful to tracking our experience of what this speaker is saying. So how about we look at page 46? This is a poem called Downhearted by Ada Limon, who lives in Kentucky. So it's got horses in it. Downhearted. 6 horses died in a tractor-trailer fire. There, that's the hard part. I wanted to tell you straight away so we could grieve together. So many sad things. So many sad things. That's just one on a long recent list that loops and elongates in the chest, in the diaphragm, in the alveoli. What is it they say? Heartsick or downhearted? I picture a heart lying down on the floor of the torso, pulling up the blankets over its head, thinking this pain will go on forever, even though it won't. The heart is watching Lifetime movies and wishing and missing all the good parts of her that she has forgotten. The heart is so tired of beating herself up. She wants to stop it still, but also she wants the blood to return, wants to bring in the thrill and wind of the ride, the fast pull of life driving underneath her. What the heart wants her horses back. I have this roving microphone, so is there anyone who'd like to read it a second time so we can hear?
Downhearted by Ada Limon. Sorry, do you want me to move? 6 horses died in a tractor-trailer fire. There, that's the hard part. I wanted to tell you straight away so we could grieve together. So many sad things. That's just one on a long recent list that loops and elongates in the chest, in the diaphragm, in the alveoli. What is it they say? Heartsick or downhearted? I picture a heart lying down on the floor of the torso, pulling up the blankets over its head, thinking this pain will go on forever, even though it won't. The heart is watching Lifetime movies and wishing and missing all the good parts of her that she has forgotten. The heart is so tired of beating herself up, she wants to stop it still, but also she wants the blood to return, wants to bring in the thrill and wind of the ride, the fast pull of life driving underneath her. What the heart wants her horses back.
So you know what my question is, right? I told you what it was going to be. So what do you notice? Maybe we could leave the mic out there. You don't need a dissertation. Just what are some of the things that jump out at you about the poem or that call their attention to you? And that's hard. I'm not seeing it as well, so if you have a comment, you can just read them.
Questions to the reader? There are questions to the reader?
Oh, yeah. So what's the impact of the questions to the reader? What is it they say, heartsick or downhearted, and then what the heart wants? How did you feel when you saw those questions interrupt the statements in the poem?
Do I think they interrupt them?
Well, I'm just saying, what did they do for you when you got to them?
Well, as a reader, I think you want to answer them. Pulls you in.
Yeah, I think it makes me feel like I'm participating in the poem, like it's actually talking to me. I love asking questions in the poems that I write because I have questions and I don't always have the answers to them, but because I think it also does invite the reader to do a little bit of that work on their own, and then to come back into the poem with that kind of to bolster whatever else happens. And I feel that way as I read the poem here as well.
I guess it sounds a bit like maybe you're having a conversation with a friend, too.
I really heard that sense of conversation when you read the poem so beautifully. It felt like a voice talking to a friend. You know, it's not a formal address at all. It's an honest kind of conversation.
And I think the enjambment helps that conversational because it's almost that you're interrupting a friend in mid-sentence. What did you just say? Like that kind of, trying to catch up with like this crazy story that your friend is telling you. It's not a formal question and answer. It's a really conversational.
Those line breaks that pull you forward in a way. Line breaks that happen in the middle of a statement. The one I really notice is toward the bottom of the poem where it says, the heart is so tired of beating. I know the sentence keeps going, but my mind kind of hovers there for a minute because that's what hearts do. But of course, beating herself up. And there's this transformation that happens. I'm made to remember that this is a little character, a little person. I really just noticed that the heart isn't it. And the first few times it's addressed, pulling the blankets up over its head. But then it becomes, once the Lifetime movies come into the poem, I think the heart becomes a woman, wishing, missing all the good parts of her that she has forgotten. And I feel that might be the place where the speaker of the poem pulls this metaphor in close and makes it really private in a way.
Right, that's how it made me feel like I was almost a part of the poem, like it was almost talking like parts of like person's life, like they can be like engulfed into the poem and like put themselves in it to kind of get like that connection.
Yeah, I really agree. I think that's what's really exciting about poems. As a reader, you're grabbed, and you're drawn into somebody else's very particular experience of things. And in this poem we have images of the body, and suddenly we're inside the body, feeling these things, watching them happen. It makes what is being described feel larger, more powerful, and somehow being inside of it means that I know this person better. And I can't quite dismiss what she's saying because I felt it now. I've read this poem, I've been there, I've been on the floor of the torso, and I know. I feel like that makes us better people to get into the habit of listening and trusting other people's subjective experiences of life. So I think it's a great side effect of poetry. This is a kind of silly question that I ask all the time at the beginning of these conversations, and even in the classes that I teach at Princeton. If this were the only poem you'd ever read, what would it say to you that poems are? What would poems be about? What would they be doing? know if this is the only one that you've ever seen.
Collection of raw emotion.
Pardon me?
A collection of raw emotion.
Okay, a collection of raw emotion,
It's an expression of life.
an expression of life.
It's kind of elegizing the dead and working through grief throughout the poem. So if this is the only thing I have seen, I might think that all poetry is working through something.
Yeah, and it's doing that, elegizing in a really different way,
Yeah.
right? It's not saying, oh, you know, whatever, sauerkraut, this horse was so good and noble. It's
Yeah.
saying, no, 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 this is how I feel now that
Yeah,
that horse is
yeah.
gone.
Absolutely.
I mean, it kind of like takes like the six horses dying and kind of turns into a joke. I feel like it seems a little bit like I like the poem in a way, but I feel like mixed because it seems kind of escapist in a way. It's like, oh, we're gonna start with the six horses like really dying, which is actually like a sad thing. And I can just imagine her sitting there writing, and she just starts like kind of taking this, like reanimating this kind of dead metaphor about like the or literalizing the kind of term downhearted, and it just becomes kind of conversational and jokey, and you have the Lifetime movies, and it kind of gets away. And then at the end, when it's like, oh, she wants her horses back, it's not moving. It's like, ooh, that's clever. I don't know. It seems, yeah, so I feel like kind of mixed about it. If this were the only poem I ever read, I'm not sure how I feel about poetry.
The allegiance of the poem isn't 100% to the horses.
Yeah.
That's the trigger, but it's a poem about a private person's experience. And I think, you know, even perhaps self-consciously indulging that experience, and this is what it's like, this is how bad it is. I know it won't always be like this, but I want to tell you what it feels like right now. Another poem, perhaps by the same poet, could sort of stay on the horses and think about, you know, think about their lives. What I love about poetry is that you can come to the same topic from lots of different perspectives. And for some readers, you nail it, and for other readers, they want something else, and that's fair too.
Right, and for me, it's kind of like the horses were just a metaphoric thing of different aspects of her life that she might have lost throughout the course of different events that happened in her life.
Have you ever had an experience where you lose something? I'll tell you a story. Like I had a divorce, and I thought I dealt with it. And then the next breakup I had after that, I was grieving in such an outsized way that it couldn't have just been for the recent breakup. It was for the other one. And sometimes I feel like we latch on to things that can help give expression to the feelings that we need to express. And in this poem, maybe that's part of what's happening. Okay, so the horses are gone, that's sad. But here's somebody who's also living with a sense of sorrow that needs to get out somehow. So that becomes a vehicle for that.
I think Lifetime movies can do that too.
Right. Yeah, you don't really care about it. It lets you cry when you need to cry. Yeah. Let's look at another poem just on the following, on page 48. This is by a poet named Christian Wyman. And it's called After the... Ooh, I want the microphone back. Howard wants her microphone.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay. After the diagnosis. No remembering now when the apple sapling was blown almost out of the ground. No telling how, with all the other trees around, it alone was struck. It must have been luck, he thought for years, so close to the house it grew. It must have been night. Change is a thing one sleeps through when young, and he was young. If there was a weakness in the earth, a give he went down on his knees to find and feel the limits of, there is no longer. If there was one random blow from above, the way he's come to know from years in this place, the roots were stronger. Whatever the case, he has watched this tree survive wind ripping at his roof for nights on end, heats and blights that left little else alive. No remembering now. A day's changes mean all to him, and all days come down to one clear pane through which he sees among all the other trees this leaning, clenched, unyielding one that seems cast in the form of a blast that would have killed it, as if something at the heart of things and with the heart of things had willed it. Okay. Surrender the mic if somebody wants to read it again.
If there was one random blow from above, the way he's come to know from years in this place, the roots were stronger. Whatever the case, he has watched this tree survive, wind ripping at his roof for nights on end, heats and blights that left little else alive. No remembering now. A day's changes mean all to him, and all days come down to one clear pane through which he sees, among all the other trees, this leaning, clenched, unyielding one that seems cast in the form of a blast that would have killed it, as if something at the heart of things and with the heart of things had willed it.
Okay. After the diagnosis, I'd love to hear what you noticed in the poem, what you felt in terms of the conversation between the title and the body of the poem as well.
I noticed a comparison. Compare Whitwood and I kind of noticed a comparison of a time in a life when things was different, and he realized that it is what it is now, and you can't go back and change it. So that's what I noticed.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of time. Even the title raises a sense of time, right? After is the first word of the title. And then, the first line has the word now in it. There's a lot that's telling us, there was a then when this is what I thought, there was a now when this is what I think. And there's this kind of interesting movement back and forth between perspectives that the poem has. What do you hear changing in this poem? What was the then, the perspective, and the sense that emerges later in the poem?
think the part where it says the roots were stronger. It moves back and forth in time and space from the man himself looking through the pane, and then the tree outside. The tree outside amongst all the other trees. There's a shifting in both time and space. So here you have stronger, but as it goes, I'm gonna go back to if there was a weakness in the earth, a give, he went down on his knees to find and feel the limits of. There is no longer. It's the strength, but the strength changes over time and space. That's what I get out of it.
Yeah, I think I hear in what you're saying in sense of, in the beginning of the poem, there's this something like, oh, luck, must have been lucky, this weak tree somehow survived, lucky it. Then the stakes change a little bit, right? The title tells us the stakes have changed. And so what he's finding or choosing to see is a strength that's always been there. I feel like the tree becomes this really useful vehicle for thinking about his own self, perhaps, survival, the difference between luck and something larger than that, which I can imagine would be useful to want to trust in if a diagnosis was sitting in front of you. So there's some heavy stakes in the poem, but there's also this really kind of lilting, rhyming language. How do those things work together for you? What did the music of the poem do for your experience of the material? material. Yes, Dustin?
I love the part where it says, I think it changes when at this part, whatever the case, he had watched this tree survive, wind ripping at his roof for nights, on end, heats and blights that left little else alive. So he kind of like, to me, he was like a little down about something, and then he lifted himself up by thinking about the things that he went through before, and he survived.
Yeah. I also feel when I hear the harmony of rhyme, I feel that there's a sense of balance or resolution or things are right, like just in my ear. And the material in this poem, like I said, the stakes are high. We don't know what will happen in terms of this diagnosis, but the music and the harmony and the safety of rhyme feels like something consoling to me. It might even make it easier to talk about something that's fraught. As a writer, I know that I turn to rhyme or traditional form when my material has a good chance of getting the better of me, and I need like an extra hand and things. I need something to help wrangle. And form says, well, you've got to obey these rules. You've got to follow this path. And so my thoughts get corralled a little bit. I can imagine that the form here might have helped do that. It might also be something that pushes you forward. You get to the end of the line and you say, what do I say? Well, it has to rhyme with C's. Okay, among all the other trees, I'll write that. So it seems to be almost like an aid or consolation that makes sense to me in the material. Other things you want to say about this poem? There's 2 comments in the back.
Yeah, I mean, on sound, it evokes 2 things, right? It's a struggle between the sound of the nursery rhyme or the lullaby, which will not soothe the singer or the hearer, right? After the diagnosis, there's nothing that will help you sleep, not even the most carefully ordered sounds. And similarly, it evokes that very rigorous order that we try to ascribe to sacred language. So we've already have the body language of kneeling and finding the weakness and the limits, which is a language of prayer, right? So if you have that other struggle, which leads you to sort of find the order in the chaos, the randomness, the life unraveled, the rhyme, if it soothes, it only does so up to a point. So there's a real struggle there.
I think for me, the musicality and the harmony helps call attention to the way in which time is not constant. In the beginning of the poem, things just seem to take a lot of time, and then near the end, things happen really, really quickly and also really, really slowly, which is very similar to the way in which in music you can control time with either eighth notes and make things the same amount of time feel really, really fast, or if you hold that note for a whole note or plus, can make the same time feel almost an eternity. And I think that's happening as we go through the poem, is time is moving really quickly, and then that line that says, and a day's changes means all to him, or all of a sudden one day that just went by in a flick now is almost a lifetime. And I think that music, it's reinforced by the musicality of the poem.
Underscores the sort of shifting sense of time depending on what you're waiting for, what you're dealing with, if it's too fast or it's too slow, which is true to life. So what does this poem do to add to our definitions of what poems are now that we've read 2 poems in our life? How does this change or contradict what you felt?
This one's much more about endurance than the last one.
nature is part of the person here, and it seems actually like the tree is maybe the sickness. So that was really interesting to me that like it's a natural image that actually seems sick. It's the tree that is clenched and unyielding, and the tree that was planted and no one's quite sure how it grew or how it survived. So that was unusual for me.
Oh, that's interesting. I would project the speaker onto the tree, and it seems like, okay, this person's going to make it.
Oh,
but
that's
it's also,
interesting.
no, I also can see the dark side of the poem. Like, where did this come from? Oh, but it's been here.
But I agree with the part of like, it's more of like he's focusing on that one tree that's been like survived through all these different things and for whatever's going on, whatever the diagnosis was for the person, they're looking at that tree as an inspiration. If that tree can hold on and keep doing what it's doing, then I can too. So it's more of an inspirational thing.
I realize I've given you two poems that are quite dark, potentially so even if we don't have a lot of time to discuss it, maybe I'd like to end on a poem about birth and joy and life on page 86. But I'll say, I mean, we need a vocabulary for talking about the dark stuff, because it becomes a problem when you can't do that. And so I really appreciate the poems that go there and help me to kind of process what's inside of me sometimes as well. But the joyful poems are also such a delight. This one is called Crowning by Kevin Young. And it's about the birth of his son. Maybe I'll read it and we can go out and talk together casually about it and other things. Crowning. I don't have the microphone, but can you hear me if I just read it?
Let me just give it to you. Hold it in your hand.
Okay. Crowning. Now that knowing means nothing, now that you are more born than being, more awake than awaited, since I've seen your hair deep inside, mother, a glimpse, grass in late winter, early spring, watching your mother's pursed, throbbing, purpled power, her pushing you for 1 whole hour, 2, almost 3, almost out, maybe never, animal smell and peat, breath and sweat and mulch matter, and at once you descend or drive, are driven by mother's body, by her will and brilliance, by bowel, by wanting, and your hair peering as if it could see. And I saw you storming forth, taproot, your cap of hair half in, half out, and wait, hold it there, the doctors say. And she squeezing my hand, her face full of fire, then groaning your face out like a flower, blood bloom, crocused into air, shoulders and the long cord still rooting you to each other, to the other world, into this afterlife among us living. The cord I cut like an iris, pulsing. Then you, wet against mother's chest, still purple, not blue, not yet red, no cry. Warming now opening your eyes, midnight blue in the blue-black dawn. Thank you so much. That's such a beautiful note to end on, but I would like to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Guy LaMolinara, who is here from the National Center for the Book.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming here tonight, and I wanted to thank the Louisiana Center for the Book for co-sponsoring this program, and Jim Davis, who you met at the beginning of the program. He's been directing the center for over 10 years now, and he does a wonderful job of promoting Louisiana's rich literary heritage. So thank you, Jim, for all you do for us. The Center for the Book at the Library of Congress is a division that has this great mission. We promote books, reading, libraries, and literacy nationwide, but the only way we can do that is through these state centers like the one here in Louisiana, which is at the State Library in Baton Rouge. So I'm happy to tell you we're opening a new center for the book next month, and it will be our 52nd affiliate, and that will be in Puerto Rico. And so if you happen to be in Puerto Rico at the end of next month, please come visit the new Puerto Rico Center for the Book, and Tracy will be there to open it for us. So we're really excited about that. So once again, thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm sorry this is the last of our American conversations, because I've really enjoyed being on all of them with Tracy, and I've met so many wonderful people I never would have met before, and I've gone to places I never would have seen before. So I hope you really enjoy this book and you keep reading it. And also, if you want to continue the conversation and you use Twitter, you can go use the hashtag American Conversations, and you can see what other people have done along this journey with us. So thank you again.